Inauspicious times. Some people think I hate Mondays. I have nothing against Mondays. What I don't like is that it doesn't come alone, but rather hauls along 4 additional working days and pushes the weekends further away. Nothing personal. It was a Monday, and I was hurrying to my office. I should have said crawling, thanks to the bustling Monday morning traffic on Nairobi's 8-lane Gramo Highway. A popular song of that time was blaring on the radio. "Don't touch my breasts, stranger. They are still tender. Wait for a while. Let the body become strong like wild cactus. I will then understand what your hands say. Don't touch my breasts until then, stranger." Unaware that something of that sort was happening in my office almost at the same time, I continued to battle my way through the traffic. In Nairobi, there were only 2 kinds of decent jobs: working for a Shah or working for a Patel. To secure one of these coveted positions, you needed to be well versed in writing impressive resumes. Your chances of finding a job depended largely on how cleverly you could manipulate your resume. The CVs of most job seekers claimed almost impossible feats. I, too, got my current job by presenting an impressive resume, even though I had not done anything nearly as great as I had boasted. My boss was a Patel, the owner of a colony of street houses. I was the manager entrusted to look after the colony. It was my job to maintain the houses, draw and enforce lease contracts, and keep the accounts. I held on to that 3-in-1 job, believing in the adage that failures were stepping stones to success. By then I had had so many failures that I surely must have accumulated enough steps to build a stadium. I usually arrived at the office about half an hour after the scheduled time. That day, despite lack of effort on my part, I arrived rather early. Our colony of houses was protected by a high electric fence and 2 security guards at the main gate. The Adada birds were broadcasting their morning programs from the top of mimosa trees. Motorcycles, anchored with heavy chains, were parked near the fence, as if the owners suspected the vehicles might want to break away and run. I sauntered to my office, but the guards were even faster, following me and trying to overtake me. Their faces showed fear. The door to my room opened, swayed a little, and stopped. 2 people were enacting a scene in my office, perhaps placing their faith in my habit of late arrival. I was witness to a scene that I least expected to see. The man's face was not familiar. He was a sturdy man, about 35 years of age, with taut muscles and sweat streaming down the middle of his back. He looked accusingly at me for having arrived there unannounced. The girl picked up her clothes with one hand and ran out, the other hand covering her breasts. She returned a second later to retrieve her footwear. She was a cleaner of the housing colony. She came early in the morning with her hair plaited and decorated with lines by a professional hairdresser. She appeared fresh in her white clothes every day, and was crisp and warm, like a loaf just out of the oven. This man had enamored her within just 2 days of his arrival there. The man, Mario Ngoma, was the driver of Don, a recent tenant of the colony who was from Mauritius. He eventually performed other services in addition to driving his master's car. I learned later that he had been a famous footballer of the Harambee team. With his thighs rubbing against each other, he walked out, turning again and again to look at me. It seemed as if he expected me to apologize. That was how I got introduced to Mario. A week earlier, Don had come to my office and told me that he liked the house. He was short and would never have had trouble negotiating all kinds of entrances to buildings with his head held high. He had taken charge as the representative of the International Monetary Fund in Nairobi. He spoke guardedly, and you could see at once that he was not a person to be ignored. The lease document for the house was awaiting his signature. He thoroughly read the document I had prepared for him. His profession must have inducted him into this habit. It was a well-known fact that all contracts prepared were one-sided. He was new, and so was, perhaps, not aware of this practice. We had footnotes written in very tiny letters, visible only to the eyes of ants. We inserted many important clauses by way of footnotes. Don wished to read them all. He meditated on them for a long time, scratching his head. He was going through as much trouble as he would when negotiating an IMF document. "Sir, this document is ironclad. You can't change a line, a word, a letter, why, even a space. Come again tomorrow and take another look at it if you want," I said. After considering the matter with deep thought, he picked up his pen and put his name, Valet Don, on the document. After I met his wife, it occurred to me that Don was perhaps a Tamil, just like me, from my part of the world. He used many Tamil curse words, and his pronunciation was impressive. Valet Don, I learned, was the westernized version of the real name, Valet Don. Mario was working for a Tamil foreigner for the first time, and he wondered about many of Don's qualities, likes and dislikes. He had no real idea of what he should or should not do. The first lesson he learnt was that when he took the car out in the morning, he was not, under any circumstances, to reverse it. That would cause heavy disaster that day. Something Don did when he bought his car also puzzled him. He placed lime fruits under the wheels and drove over them, crushing them. I gave him an explanation of sorts, telling him that the ritual was a form of protection against evil eyes. This seemed to get him all agitated, and he wandered off in a deep reverie. Another day he asked me, "That madam has 2 dot marks, one at the center of her forehead and the other on the top. But her daughter has only one. Why is that?" I had a ready answer, and after that he started coming to me frequently with all types of doubts. If I didn't have a suitable explanation, I invented one. Don's wife was very orthodox and wore a sari every day and covered herself with an embroidered shawl to protect her from the cold. Her neck was full of folds, like that of a turkey. She showed sufficient evidence of a lush head of hair at some point in her life. The white streaks in her hair gave her face a certain kind of beauty and dignity. Mario respected her immensely, and her word was his command. He participated wholeheartedly in the celebrations of their festivals, like Navaratri and Diwali. He enthusiastically asked questions about the whys and hows of all they did, and soon got used to their ways of life, including the food they ate. Gradually, Mario came less and less to me with his doubts about his master's practices. On the contrary, he seemed capable now of answering my questions about some of their special rituals. He observed fasts along with his madam, understanding and expecting the benefits that might accrue to him. There was one thing that stumped Mario for a long time, and that was Ralu Harlem, the most vicious and inauspicious time period. It covered particular hours of the day that were considered treacherous. Mario was very upset one day. He told me that Don had berated him for coming late. The boss was to fly abroad, and his flight was at 2 in the afternoon. It was a Friday, and Don had waited all ready to leave home by 10 in the morning. Mario came a few minutes late. Unfortunately, Rahul Harlem had already started. Don was vexed with him and canceled his entire trip. One look at Mario's face, and I was determined to explain the secrets of Rahul Harlem to him. I went into a detailed explanation of how, according to a myth, Rahu, a mythical planet, became the enemy of the sun and continues to avenge the sun even today. Rahu took possession of certain hours of the day, and it is believed that any work done during that particular period ends in disaster. Mario accepted my explanation with the joy of a child. He perhaps did not expect such a simple explanation. He asked me to tell him the exact hours when each day was in the throes of Rahu. I gave him a pithy acronym with the first letters of the day in the order of their Rahu Kalam, the memorizing of which would be the guide to finding the exact hours which were inauspicious on any particular day. He nodded his head as if he understood it all, but it wasn't until later that I realized how much of it he had really absorbed. The Don couple had a daughter about 14 years old, who showed all signs of turning into a very pretty young woman. Her hair was dense, with no parting at all. However much it was combed down, it could not lessen the attractiveness of her face. She was almost always in the swimming pool, in a two-piece swimsuit, frolicking with friends of her own age. Once I saw her sharing a bite of yamasoma meat cutlet, and was stunned. I asked Mario, "This girl eats roasted meat. Aren't they pure vegetarians?" "Buana, don't ask me. She buys beef cutlets on her way to school at the Yaya Center and eats it without the knowledge of her parents." "She's just a girl. Let her have fun." "No, Buana, I'm not worried about her eating meat. It is just that she does it secretly." Don lived in a world of his own. He came to my office, often with some complaint or other, wearing an overcoat that seemed to have an abundance of buttons. Since his hair was home-dyed, unprofessionally, the upper half and the lower half were of different colors. I often wondered if I should speak to him about his daughter. The girl had completely immersed herself in Nairobi culture, thanks to her friendship with Kenyan girls of her age, while Mario had forgotten his own customs and habits and was leaning towards Don's culture. His affection for his madam grew, and gradually he gave up eating meat, becoming a slave of Tamilian dishes like idli, sambar, and dosa. He had begun to think seriously about Tamil holy days and the fasts associated with them. But he was also caught in a dilemma. Should he speak about the daughter to her mother or not? Fortunately, he was not forced into making a decision one way or other. Fate had other plans. Don received transfer orders when the family was deep in the midst of the Chaturthi fast. He had not been granted the customary 4-year tenure in his present posting. Mario was heartbroken and wailed when they departed. He missed their culture, food, and holy days. He also didn't have a job. Luckily for him, the Swedish embassy had advertised for a driver just then, and I sent him off with a letter of introduction to meet the appropriate person the very next day. With that, Mario disappeared from my life. After many months, I went to the Yaya Center. My daughter, in her 2 pigtails, was with me. That was the afternoon hour when people were all hungry. Hunger was evident everywhere. Some ate sitting down, some standing, some others walking along the footpaths. As usual, my daughter's pace slackened as soon as she saw the ice cream parlor. Like a pup that had discovered a grasshopper, she planted her feet wide and refused to move. Can any flavor ever equal vanilla? The entire area was suffused with that aroma. I saw Mario at a distance. He came towards me, walking like a giraffe. Portions of his outsized overcoat flapped like wings on the sides. He had become thinner. His arms and legs rattled independently as if they were joined to his body with a thread. On his forehead were streaks of sacred ash with a vermilion dot in the center. I was shocked to see him like that. My daughter hid herself behind me and held my hand tightly. "Abrigani? Musri?" "Musri Sana." "What brings you here, Mario?" "I have been to the temple, Buana. Remember, it is the auspicious Saturday of October. Are you fasting, Mario? Of course. How can I not? Did you not go to work today? What work? Haven't I been in search of a job for the past 6 months? 6 months? What happened to the job at the Swedish embassy? Forget it, Buana. Though the reed can be used to blow music, should you not wait until it becomes softer if you want to scratch your back with it? He said. Tell me what happened. They called me for an interview at 12 noon on a Wednesday. How could I go? Why not? It was Rahuhalam, right and proper, most destructive time. How would I expect to get the job? Mario went on his way, his knees shaking independently of each other, not slowing down one bit. I stood there, staring at him. Buana, 2 vanillas, the parlour man said.